I want to keep this video as short as I can, but I have a lot of information to put in it, so forgive me if I'm talking a little fast. You might need to rewind the video as needed. At this point, you should have your 3 pieces of material cut and this long rectangular piece. The first thing we're going to want to do is attach our zipper to it. There's a lot of tutorials on YouTube about how to make a duffel bag, but I see very few of them that involve a covered zipper. In other words, this flap of material covering the zipper. I've gone over this in some of my other projects, but I'll try to explain it real quick without actually being at the sewing machine. The first thing you're going to want to do is separate the 2 halves of the zipper. And if this is the outside of the material, then you're going to want to lay that zipper tape face down across the length of the top here. In other words, you're going to be wanting to look at the top of this material and the bottom of the zipper tape, and you're going to line the edge of the zipper tape along the top edge of this material. Once you've got that sewn in place with a stitch as close to the edge as you can get, you're going to want to make a fold in the material at about 1 1/4 inches. Well, it's really going to depend on the size of zipper you use, but I used a number 10 YKK nylon coil zipper, and I used about 1 1/4 inches of material to cover that up. So you're going to want to make this fold at about 1 1/4 inches, and this is going to be folded underneath the material if we're looking at the top here. So this is going to be folded under along with the zipper, and then you're going to want to run a stitch along the edge of that material here. I'll point this out on the bag. This is the stitch you'll be making. You'll sew this half of the zipper to the material, fold it under, make that stitch there. Next, you're going to want to flip the material over and run 2 more rows of stitches to hold that zipper tape in place. Now at the bottom here, you're going to want to sew the other half of that zipper tape. Same way, we're going to lay the zipper tape to where, if this is the top of the material, you're going to lay the zipper tape to where you're looking at the bottom of the zipper tape, line it up. Sew a row of stitches to hold the zipper tape in place, only this time we're going to do about a 3/8 inch fold, and then sew a row of stitches to hold that in place. You can see that here. This is the bottom half, this is the other half of that zipper tape sewed to the bottom of the material, and then it's got this very small fold, and then I just sewed a row of stitches along that fold to hold that in place. Now if you want to add any extra features to the bag, now's the time to do it, whether that be handles, an exterior pocket. And myself, when I was putting mine together, I toyed with the idea of taking a 2-inch piece of webbing and sewing kind of a drag handle with a box X stitch at each end, but ultimately I ended up not doing that. But I'll just go ahead and stick to explaining the features that I did on my bag. Now on my bag, I knew that when this was connected to the main backpack, I wanted the zipper facing the back of the bag to where I can just pull the tin out, set the bag down, pull the tin out, and the zipper would be in the same place every time. So that's why I did the compression straps the way I'm going to show you. I could have just sewn the compression straps to the bag in a way that I could just feed the end of one strap through one loop, then the other, and then wrap it around the bag, buckle it in place. That would have been fine. You can do that if you want. The reason I did it this way, like I explained, was so that when I connect this bag, the duffel, to the backpack, the zipper is in the same place every time. The way I did that was I have this box X stitch and a couple of bar tack stitches here that bump right up against these 2 gear loops on the backpack. So these box X stitches are about a quarter way up from the zipper. That's easy enough to find. All I did was folded my material in half and then folded it in half again, and that kind of told me where a quarter way up from that bottom zipper was, from this half of the zipper tape. So that's about a quarter way up. So to do these compression straps, I need to take some measurements. So if I take the edge of my ruler and line it up to the edge of this gear loop on my backpack, you can see that from the edge of this one to the edge of this one, I've got about 8 inches. And right in the middle of that is going to be 4 inches. You can also see that each one of these gear loops is about 2 inches across. So with those measurements, I can get started. So if I find the center along this line a quarter way up from the material by measuring from the outsides, since my material is about 16 3/4 all the way, all I got to do is measure from each side about 8 3/8 of an inch. So if I measure 8 3/8 of an inch, I can find the center along that mark we made a quarter way up. What I did after that was line my ruler up to where the 4-inch mark on my ruler was lined up halfway on the material. So the 4-inch mark was lined up with this halfway mark that we made. And then I just made a mark at the edge of the ruler, and then at the 8-inch mark. And then since each gear loop was about 2 inches, I made another mark at 2 inches, made another mark at 6 inches. So that should be basically the dimensions I need of those gear loops. From there, from these marks, I took my ruler and made a mark that was about at a 1/2 inch from this one and 1.5 inches. And these two inside marks here, see if I can show this better. That's going to be exactly where the strap is, since it's a 1-inch strap. Now the next thing I did was measure in between the front and back gear loops, and on my ruler I can see that comes to 2 7/8 of an inch. So I took that ruler and laid it on the webbing and made marks directly onto the webbing. So I made a mark there and a mark 2 7/8 inches away, and then I centered in between those two marks on that line we drew on the material that's about a quarter way up. So I did that on each piece of webbing, and once I got those centered on this line, I went ahead and put bar tack stitches. Did 4 bar tack stitches to hold the nylon webbing in place on the cordura. I had those bar tack stitches in place. I just simply did my large box X stitches. Just want to point out that go ahead and leave your nylon webbing cut a little long, because you can always trim it later. It's better at this point to have it too long than too short. Also, if you want at this point to add a shoulder strap or some kind of hardware on there to the side panels, go ahead and do that. I just added a simple D-ring using some nylon webbing and a box X stitch and sewed those on to the side panels. So once you've got whatever features you want in place, now comes the hard part. You're going to have to sew the side panels onto the main bag. The first thing you're going to want to do is connect the two halves of the zipper tape back together, and then so you've got a tube essentially, and then you're going to want to turn that tube inside out. Now, to sew this side panel on to the main bag, it's more difficult than it looks, because you're sewing a round piece of material onto a straight piece of material. I myself watched a few different tutorials on YouTube of how to make a duffel bag, and despite all the different tutorials that I watched, I still messed it up. It took me a few failed attempts before finally getting it right. The first one I tried to do, I put basting tape all along the outside of the side panel and then tried to tape it in place, but that didn't work out for me. Then I tried the same thing again with clips. That didn't work out for me either. I ended up having to seam rip all the stitches apart and pull the two side panels off and start over. What I finally ended up doing was just lining one edge of the material up at 3/8 of an inch using the marking on my sewing machine, and then placing the side panel over that, and then just slowly, after I got my initial locking stitch in place, just slowly worked my way down a few stitches at a time by keeping this edge at 3/8 of an inch and then bending the material of the side panel over to where it met the edge of the main bag, and then just slowly sewing a few stitches at a time. A main problem I was having was, as I was bending this material of the side panel, I would shift the material of the main bag out of place to where it was sewing crooked without realizing it, and then I'd be coming off the material. I had to go back and start over a few times. In the end, I think the only thing that's going to help is experience. You're just going to have to try it a few times, and if it doesn't work out, just start over and do it again. Once you've got those side panels sewn in place with a row of stitches, now just use whatever technique you're going to use to cover up that seam and protect it. Whether that be an overcast stitch, or, as I like to do on all my bags, I use grosgrain ribbon. So if you're done with those side panels, now would be a good time to add your buckle hardware. The way I did mine was on one end of the nylon webbing. The first thing I did was slide this metal rectangular ring down the nylon webbing and then put the female end of the buckle on, because obviously I can't slide this ring over the buckle. Then folded the nylon webbing back onto itself, put a bar tack stitch to hold the buckle in place, and then 2 more bar tack stitches to hold this ring in place. Then on the other end, obviously you just feed the nylon webbing through the male end of the buckle, and then just fold the material over, do a simple bar tack stitch that keeps the nylon webbing from coming out of the buckle. If you want to make these gear straps that I demonstrated in an earlier video, then it's pretty simple. All you need to do is take a piece of webbing and fold the end back over onto itself. I actually did 2 folds, and then just do a couple of bar tack stitches to hold it in place. That'll give you your loop. Then just feed the other end of the webbing through these metal hooks. They work by just placing that hook through that loop that you just sewed. I hope the information in this video wasn't too confusing for anybody. If you stay tuned, I'm going to make another video explaining some of the changes I made from the original design, some improvements I'm going to make in the future, and if I ever make another one of these bags, some things that I might end up doing different.